Hello, everybody. We're going to just wait 1 second. We're going to just wait 1 more minute for more people to join, and then we'll get started. Jesse, I just unmuted you.
Okay, great. If you hear me clicking, I'm just pulling up slides. Okay. But I see yours too.
You see the slides?
I do, yes, I can see yours.
I'm just seeing if Pilar is on.
Don't think yet.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Okay. So we can get started though, and welcome to the Seaver Center's first Zoom webinar. So this is going to be a learning experience for all of us. And we would love your feedback about what works, what doesn't work, just so that way we can kind of refine this and kind of be the best resource that we can be for families kind of going through this challenging time for all of us, but especially for families who have children on the spectrum. So what we were thinking about doing for today's format is we have a short presentation that hopefully everybody can see at home on your computer screens. If you don't, you can always message me, and Jesse is part of the call, and you can let me know if the image is not showing. And then what we're gonna do, we're gonna save at least 20 minutes for the end for individuals to ask questions using the Zoom chat feature. Sorry, I'm also just admitting people from the waiting room. Is everybody familiar with that feature? You can shake your heads. I'm gonna type a message just so that way you see it. So you guys can type in questions as we go. Dr. Trellis will be kind of coordinating that towards the end, and we're going to do our best to answer as many questions as we can. And if there are like common themes that come up, that will help guide us for our future webinars. I just saw a question is, will the PowerPoints be at the end? The last slide is going to be my email address. And for anybody that would like the slides, I'm happy to email them over. So don't feel like you need to be taking notes or anything like that. We will make everything accessible. Okay, so Jesse, did the slide change?
It did, yes.
Perfect, okay. So in terms of what we hope to cover today, the three Seaver staff are going to just introduce ourselves and give us a brief background of our positions. Then we are going to talk about structuring our days and environment, how to use visuals. And again, as I mentioned, we are going to spend a lot of time being able to answer individual questions. Sorry. Jackson. Okay, so let me go back. So my name is Michelle Gorenstein. I am a clinical psychologist and director of outreach for the Seaver Autism Center. I spend most of my days in the community helping community centers run more effective social skills programming. And I also do a lot of parent lectures. Jesse, do you want to?
Yes, sure. Hi, I'm Jessie Zweifach. I'm also a clinical psychologist at the Seaver Center. And I spend most of the day doing testing and therapy with kids and parents, those on the spectrum, and also work with individuals with ADHD, anxiety, other kinds of challenges, and love parent management training and that kind of work. So hopefully we'll be able to provide you with some basic strategies, and then would love to hear your feedback on what you'd like to hear next.
Hi, I'm Pilar Treyes. I'm a child psychiatrist. I do a lot of, I mostly work with kids that are in the spectrum and other children with different abilities. I work very closely with Michelle and Jessie, and a lot of what I do, I think, clinically has come to help families that are experiencing a lot of disruptive behavior at home and are struggling to help their children deal with like anxiety or very rigid behaviors or sometimes aggression or any sort of maladaptive things. What we're going to talk about today is definitely Michelle and Jessie are the experts, but hopefully having me here might help with some of the questions that relate more to the medical side if any of you have. And if you find this helpful, we'll definitely integrate that more in future webinars. Okay, I'm going to mute me, not to.
Okay. So unfortunately, all of our lives, and as you heard my child coming into the room, have kind of been a little bit chaotic for the past 2+ weeks now. All of our routines have been disrupted. Parents are being asked to work from home while being a homeschool teacher, while managing the day-to-day of their families. So what we want to kind of talk about in the next 20 minutes is kind of just how to create structure and how to kind of use visuals to help individuals with autism manage these changes, because all of us are feeling anxious and overwhelmed with the changes, but we know change in routine is especially difficult for individuals on the spectrum. So one of the things when we think about kind of this is creating new routines, but there might be routines in your day that you can keep from pre-coronavirus. So thinking about your morning routine, if there are parts of your morning routine that can look the same, whether you are going to school or you are being homeschooled now or doing virtual learning, trying to keep those as consistent as possible. So morning routine, bedtime routine, those things are parts of the routine that can be stable. I encourage families to use the teleconferencing and virtual learning as much as possible. So if that is a viable option with your school district, kind of making use of that. So if your child has OT or speech on a certain day of the week and their therapist is providing those services, seeing if they can continue to provide them on the day that the child is used to, if possible. Scheduling fun activities. So Jesse's going to talk about using visual schedules, but creating choice time or giving children choices to make slime or do sensory play with aqua beads or go outside and take a walk and do a scavenger hunt.
Crying. Stop crying.
Those could definitely be things that are built into your new routine. It will also be important for your child, especially now that learning is taking place in the same environment with the same people as kind of their weekends. Making it clear, okay, like Monday through Friday are school days and Saturday and Sunday are family days. And whatever that means for your particular family, that would be kind of also important during this kind of time. And then once you establish a routine, try to stick with it, but also recognize that we're all dealing with this. And sometimes we do need to recognize if a routine is not working, being flexible and modifying that routine. So for some families, scheduling things down by time might be helpful. For some families that might not work, especially if now the parents are also going to be working from home and your work schedule is going to be changing. So creating structure and routine, but also recognizing that we might have a routine and we might say, you know, that worked on Monday, but Tuesday I have a work call or I have an assignment I need to get done. So Tuesday's schedule might be a little different. But once you do find a routine that does work, try to stick with it. And that will also be important. So also, when we think about creating structure, we're not only thinking about routine, we're also thinking about environment. So for a lot of families who have children on the autism spectrum, they were going to a classroom specifically designed for kids on the autism spectrum. They were very organized and we're not expecting any family to recreate a classroom in their home, especially given the fact that we're not going out, we're not going to Lakeshore Learning or Michael's to get all these supplies, but trying to create a workspace for your child, and whether that's a desk or a bridge table that you have that you can open up, or it might be a specific seat at the kitchen table or the dining room table that is the child's workspace. And that should be very specific to when the child is kind of doing their school activities. When you're thinking about the space, you're going to think about noise, lighting, any sensory issues that your child might have. So you might think of not having it a space where the family TV is and everybody's going to be going in and out. You might not think about having the space in your child's bedroom if that's going to be more of their playtime activity. So kind of being mindful of that when you create a workspace for your child. You're also going to want to organize supplies and materials. So thinking about the school supplies, whether it's crayons, markers, pencils, paper, and having that in one space. And it could be even doing things as simple as putting them in shoe boxes with labels, as well as thinking about organizing. And unfortunately, this is where there is some time given to organizing what the child is going to be working on. So often a lot of classrooms for kids on the autism spectrum are going to be designed using the TEAM model, where everything is organized visually to allow the child to be as independent as possible. So one simple strategy of that would be having the child's worksheet or work if they're not doing virtual learning and putting everything in a folder or a bin on the left side of the child. And as the work is completed, you move it to a folder or a bin on the right side. And that's a very nice visual to help the child understand, okay, here's what I need to do, and here's what's finished. That also being said, I would encourage all families to reach out to the child's teacher to find out what visuals or signs that the child was using at school, and having them potentially email you that, and you can print them out at home or recreate some of those for the child's workspace, whether it's having their name on the desk a certain way, or if they had their schedule a certain way, or if they were working on patterns or math, kind of using the same language will also be helpful and will create structure for your child. Sorry, I'm just admitting more people. The last thing I'm going to talk about in terms of creating structure and new routines is utilizing social stories. So a social story consists of short sentences. It could also consist of images, depending on your child's receptive language or understanding of language. It's often written in the first person. So if I was writing a social story for my child, it would say, there have been lots of changes in our routine. Jackson is not going to be going to school right now. School is now going to be taking place in our playroom, and we have a desk set up for where Jackson can sit. So I would use the child's first name and make it individualized. And the purpose of a social story is to present information in a simple and clear way. So obviously there's a lot of change that's taking place. Being able to present it kind of in a very clear way that a child can kind of look back to will be very helpful. And social stories are very effective in helping individuals with ASD prepare for new changes or learn new routines. And fortunately, there have been a lot of groups that have put together social stories and are continuing to write social stories to help children and individuals on the spectrum deal with COVID-19. The next slide are kind of 3 social stories that are out there for free to help individuals on the spectrum deal with anxiety related to coronavirus, as well as the changes related to coronavirus. I know Autism Speaks is also has a social story related to changes in routine that's in the works, and hopefully that'll be posted on their website shortly. So that is it for my part of the talk. Now I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Jessica Zweifach, who's going to talk a little bit more about how we can be using visuals to help with routines as well as structuring our days.
Yes. Hi. Thanks, Michelle. Hi, everyone. So we're going to be talking now about really everything Michelle was just talking about and how to support it through some additional visuals. So visual schedules are likely something many of you are familiar with from your children's school or possibly your home routine already. And since these schedules have been, really disrupted in a lot of ways, we want to make sure that we're warning our kids and warning ourselves about those changes so that we know what to expect, know what the transitions are going to be, and can just make everything a little bit more predictable for our children and also for ourselves. It helps us as parents prepare for the day and possibly our children's reactions and everything when we create these visual schedules. So the first thing that we want to say about that is keep it simple for you guys. As Michelle was saying, we might not have access to a color printer and we're certainly not going out and buying materials, so don't feel pressure. This can be done on something as simple as Post-its. Post-its also help with flexibility, because if you want to set up a schedule where you're sort of doodling a little picture and a word, you can always move them around based on what might happen if you have a work call. So we really do want to be thinking about what we have the capacity to do with our own anxiety about the situation, our own work schedules, and make sure that you're kind to yourself about what the expectations are. So keep it as simple as you can. And there are two sort of main things that we would think about with a visual schedule. Either you could create something very simple based on your child's level of understanding, a first then board. There's an example here from Due to Learn on this slide where you would very simply just say, what is coming up next? So you would say first is lunch, then we play. First is math, then we rest. And for some children, that's all we want to give them. We don't want to give them a whole overview of the whole morning routine. Whereas other kids are able to handle a whole list of what might be coming up next, and it can be helpful to have that separately. So you could have, say, Post-its on the left of the 5 activities of the whole day, and then on the right, you might have a first then, just what's coming first and what's coming next, to break it down very easily. And then your child will know what comes between, what those transitions are going to be, and it can really reduce anxiety and give them even a sense of control, or knowing that you have control over what's coming next, even when it feels so out of the ordinary for everyone. So that's the idea of a first then board versus the whole morning routine, where you might break down, first we'll have breakfast, then we'll sing a song together, then we'll do math time, computer time, etc. And we, of course, you guys know your children best. So you want to include the information that he or she needs. So for some kids, you can just write brush your teeth right after breakfast. Other children need these steps broken down much more clearly and specifically. So here's an example here of another visual where you take out your toothbrush, then you put on the paste. These can be helpful to have around your house, just posted by the sink, so that in real time the child has access to that. So that can be really helpful. And on the next slide, I'm going to have links to the Due to Learn website, where all these images are completely free. Again, if you don't have access to a printer, you can just get ideas of the kinds of things to draw and the kind of steps to make. They have visual schedules for every routine under the sun. So this can be something that's helpful during this time, or just with other adaptive skills with which your kids might be struggling. The other thing is that some kids need certain information included that others might not. And we really trust you guys to think about what your children might need. For example, the steps, as I said, to getting dressed, also possibly who's going to be present during that time. If there's more than one caregiver in your house, or an older sibling is going to be doing some of the caretaking, knowing that information can be really helpful to some children who might have difficulty with the transition from one caregiver to another, in addition to the transition from, say, mealtime to activity time. So including little bullets like that, or just warnings about those kinds of things, can be really helpful. So on the next slide, there are some visual support resources. So the Autism Speaks Toolkit really breaks down what visuals are in even more detail than I just shared, and it also can give you examples of different times to use them, not specific to this COVID time, but very, very helpful overall. And then for the free printouts, you can see that dotolearn.com is a wonderful resource. Therapists use them, people on inpatient units use them, schools use them. They're really wonderful, and it's great that parents can have access as well. So now I'm just going to talk a little bit about transitional warnings and how giving these kinds of warnings can help support the visuals we talked about, and just support the routines and the creation of predictability and routines. So these are things that are not just helpful, again, during this time, not just for kids with autism. These are the same behavioral principles that we talk about. If any of you have been in parent training, these are really related to all of that. So you want to be thinking about giving your child a transitional warning whenever there's going to be a shift. So even if it's a predictable shift, say you always have snack time after painting time, you still want to use simple, clear language and let your child know in 2 minutes it will be painting time, or in 2 minutes it will be when it's cleanup time. It'll be time to put your toys in the box. And notice how specific that is. We don't say it'll be time to clean up the room. That can be very overwhelming for a child. you want to give them the specific behavior, only give one direction at a time. So again, in 2 minutes, time to put your toys in the box. In 1 minute, time to fold your sweatshirt and put it on the hook. That'll give them a clear idea of what's expected, and also will give them some warning and hopefully reduce the risk that a child might have a behavioral reaction or an outburst because of the change. And these changes can be really, really hard and stressful for all of us, and especially our kids. So in addition to the verbal transitional warnings, there are different tools like timers that you can use. This has visual on it also. One of the best kinds of timers in this image, you can see that it would count backwards. So if a child has 30 minutes of iPad time on his or her schedule, the red would be sort of shrinking the whole time, so the kid can really see, even if he or she can't read time, how much time is left. And in addition, I would still give the verbal prompt and warning, but having that visual can be really very helpful. If you're not able to buy one of these right now, they do have them online at things like Office Max and Staples and even Amazon. There are smartphone apps that do the same thing and have the image. There's a small fee for those, but this link here, the online stopwatch, there isn't a fee. It just has a number countdown rather than that nice red that's shrinking, but still can be a helpful tool. So having that visual countdown piece. The other thing with creating these routines and creating and allowing for the transitional warnings to think about would just be offering choices when you can. So there are different opportunities for that throughout the day. It can be if you're building the morning routine together for that day, and you know that the child can do math or reading first, if that's okay with the teacher, you can ask them, would you like to do math first or reading first? And it gives the child a sense of ownership, of control. It lets you know that you're listening to them and that you value their opinion as well. And in general, try to be thinking about the idea of rewarding with a preferred activity and providing that as part of your reminder for the transitional warning, right? So as soon as you finish your reading time, you'll have the opportunity to go outside and play. You'll get to go on your scooter for 5 minutes when you finish this worksheet. So that gives them predictability and also shows them that they'll be rewarded for their efforts during this time that can be so unpredictable and stressful for lots of us. So that is transitional warnings. And we thank you all for your attention and for tuning in. We know you're really busy managing children's schedules right now, as well as your own work schedules. So we really appreciate it and would love to hear some questions and also future topics. We would love to hear also if you don't mind typing those into the chat as well.
You're muted, Michelle.
We're going to be making these webinars specific so that way we can give families information that we feel like they probably need. But we do have more general resources on our website. So if you go to the Seaver Autism Center website, there is a link now for COVID-19 resources where we've posted social stories as well as concrete resources for you. And we also have some social activities that you could be practicing at home. So I'm just looking.
Yeah, so why don't I ask the questions? I'm going to start collating them for everyone. We'll try to answer as many as we can. And then we'll try to match them in kind of similar topics. So if you don't hear your specific question, it might be that we will get to it on our next series or we didn't have time, or we're trying to link it with other people. So someone is asking what to do when the kids have a hard time connecting with their teacher through video apps. I've been hearing from a lot of my patients, they call me with similar issues where the children see their teachers in an app, and they either get very disconcerted about the fact that they're like in their house. They might be having issues with the fact that it's with the abstract concept of someone being at the other side. And then I think a lot of the kids also might be having a hard time with seeing their teacher in their own home space when they're very anxious and they're used to having a lot of structure in their day. So I think parents would like to know what advice we might have to help them troubleshoot through that.
Sure. So if it's an anxiety reaction, like Pilar is mentioning, which it sounds very possible, but please add more details to your question if it was something else. We think of trying to expose our children to different smaller maybe aspects of that scenario. So the first thing would be to give a warning of as much as you know about what's going to happen, right? So that the evening before, or the evenings, I withdraw that. The morning before, you can remind the child, tomorrow you're going to be seeing your teacher on Zoom. It's going to be a picture of your teacher on the computer, and tell them exactly what to expect, right? And then same thing, you can that morning over breakfast, give them reminders about what to expect. The other thing we could do there is if you are able to obtain a picture of the teacher, you could do sort of a mini exposure exercise where you actually say, this is what it'll be like, hold it up on the computer. Then they're not live, it's a bit less intense, there aren't as many demands placed, but you're giving the child the exposure to what might be bringing out that anxiety reaction and just getting them used to it a bit.
I think another thing that could be helpful as much as possible is if you have a space within your home where you always to expose yourself. The kids cannot be outside the home to go to school, but maybe you can have a section of your apartment that from this time to this time, this is where we are going to do school. So the child knows when they're going there, they're transitioning to academic and educational activities. And then once you're done, you transition them out. So that might help with these very unusual circumstances and how abstract it can feel.
Yeah, and I think in terms of echoing along, like writing like even like a little social story about like using Zoom, because unfortunately I think it's going to be this way for a little bit longer. Kind of how we see our friends and teachers right now is going to be a little different, but that we can talk to our teachers or give them updates, or our teachers can also see us. And agreed with Jessie, kind of like if we can get a picture of our the teacher, just to kind of create that routine.
Some other parents are also wondering if you know about any free apps or free resources that you can get where you can kind of help them with observing like emotional responses in a more concrete way.
Meaning,
are
you
yeah,
thinking like a tracking?
I would say it says emotional matching and a free but I would imagine it refers to tools to kind of help children with recognizing emotions and response to specific situations.
Right.
I will say on our website, we have links to a lot of apps. We don't typically recommend so many apps just because a lot of them do come with a cost. So we are always being mindful of that. PBS actually does a really nice job of having a lot of like emotion regulation videos, games that are free. Like Daniel's Tiger, depending on your child's age and receptive language. But on the Seaver Center's website, we have a lot of resources related to apps and online tools.
Yeah. Another question that has come in some ways is some parents are having a hard time with helping their children do work and not getting a very oppositional reaction to it. So either because they don't want to do work or they don't want to do schoolwork at home, or because they just do not want to do the work that they're being asked to do.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any advice?
Yeah, I mean, so when it's very common and all the time, and certainly during times with less structure. So when we think about a behavior like oppositionality, we want to kind of think about things that we can control before, the antecedents, and also the consequences, the things that come after that behavior. So what we gave you today, hopefully, are actually strategies that should really help with increasing compliance. When we give our kids what the schedule will be, what the concrete behavioral expectations are, knowing that there is going to be math before there is a special treat for snack time, right? That should increase compliance in and of itself, using simple language, those kinds of tools as well, and the visuals. And in terms of how to react to the non-compliance or what should come after, I mean, another consequence for non-compliance would be, or something that could come after compliance or non-compliance would be a reward. So if you know that math is just the hardest to get your son or daughter to do, you know that you want to provide a very motivating something that they get and they right after every single time, very predictable. It can be on your visual schedule. It can be food-based, it can be activity-based, it can be time with you, anything like that. And that can really also increase compliance and hopefully get kids to follow direction. You also want to be, if this is a general issue in the house right now, you really want to be catching them being compliant in other scenarios. So if they are not, if they're never, being compliant when it comes to work, find other situations where they are. If you ask, hey, Danny, can you please bring your bowl to the sink? And he does, you want to make a big deal out of that, because that'll feel really, really, unless it's aversive to your child, which does come up sometimes with labeled praise with some individual kids, and you know your kids best. But giving labeled praise, saying, Danny, I'm so proud of how you listened to mom. I'm so proud of how you brought your bowl to the sink. Give them some positive, feel good attention and mention what you're proud of as well.
And I will say, just because we're going to be signing off shortly.
We're all dealing with kids at home, so.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm in the hospital today, and I have to say it's probably easier to be at the hospital
right.
than working and homeschooling our children.
Right.
I was going to say, this is also a chance to reach out to your child's occupational therapist, teacher, to find out if there are any sensory issues or sensory strategies that the child uses to help, that the teachers are using to help the child focus, whether it's like sitting on like a bumpy surface or taking sensory breaks or jumping before they sit to work, and also finding out the language that the teacher is using can also be helpful in terms of kind of using that similar language, just so the child has that as a constant as well.
Yeah. One of the things that I think both Michelle and Jessie said that I think are very important, and just reading at the comments from everyone, is that you have to remind to give yourself a break and be very kind to yourself. This is a very difficult time, and it's going to take a while for everyone, that includes the adults, to adjust. And kids that that have different abilities and they're in the spectrum, they have a harder time sometimes with transitions. But I think with love and support, without sounding without minimizing what we are going through, I think it's going to truly help them get there. And just knowing that we all need breaks, and if there's a day where you cannot get through everything or all the demands that we're putting on ourselves, it is okay. You can try again the following day. We're all learning in this, through this new time. I would ask if you can add some more questions, and then if you have some specific topics for us, I'm going to write my email at the end of here so you can take note of it. If you want to, I thank you so much for everyone that is putting your email. We're going to share the presentation. But also, if